Hello, I'm Dhruti Shah, and this is my podcast, Have You Thought About? I'm a writer who loves to find out about what passions people are pursuing, especially if they're managing to blend together their skills and talents in unusual ways. In each edition, I chat with someone who I find particularly interesting and who's managed to fit things together in their life or profession, or both, that you don't always think of as an obvious match. Today, I'm speaking to author, historian, writer, curator, comedian, all in all brilliant person, Subhadra Das. I think. But maybe I've got that wrong, because names are really, really important. And Subhadra, you do a lot of different things, but what is your name? Please tell our audience this.
So if you allow me to steal a joke from Ahir Shah, I'm one of those South Asians who has been colonized by their own accent. So my rule is, if you are of South Asian origin, you can say my name however you want to say it, because you will be able to pronounce it better than I can. So I call myself Subhadra because I went to English schools and an American school, and that's how white people say my name. And it's like what I'm used to responding to. Hindi speakers say Subhadra. In Bengali, it's Shubhadra, because we're a very all round sounding people.
But do you ever get confused?
If I do, I don't pull on that thread too much, because then the whole thing unravels. I don't know. No, I think most of the time I'm just grateful that someone's noticed. So thanks for noticing.
That's right. But what does your name actually mean? I guess in what language as well?
Well, it's the name of a South Asian goddess. So she's a goddess in Hinduism, and she's Lord Krishna's sister. So for however cognizant your listeners are of Hindu mythology, Lord Krishna is the really sexy, cool blue guy who is a reincarnation of the god Vishnu, who's part of the Hindu trilogy. So really a very powerful and important person. And he had a sister, and his sister appears in the Mahabharata, which is one of the epics. And she's important for a number of reasons, but mainly she marries Arjun. He's like the Achilles in Hindu mythology, if you think of the Mahabharata as kind of being a bit like the Iliad. Which I do, because that's how my brain works. Technically, my mother always told me it meant a very good girl. Nominative determinism there. I don't like that one. It can also mean auspicious. So Shubho, which is the contraction, can mean like good and happy and auspicious. So that's kind of nice. I'll stick with that one.
Awesome name. I love it. You know, we're here because you're awesome, clearly, but also you do lots and lots of different things. You've got this amazing book that I just keep punting out to people saying you should read this, and they're like, do I have to? And I'm like, yes. It's a brilliant takedown book, and it's called Uncivilised, 10 Lies That Made the West. So for those who don't know and I haven't yet approached, what is it actually all about?
It's about the white supremacy that's baked into our understandings of what it means to be civilized, and also particularly this notion of Western civilization. So the book has got 10 chapters in it, and in each of those chapters, I take sort of a bit of received wisdom, you know, things like justice is blind, democracy means power to the people, art is for art's sake. And I question those, and I start to think about, you know, what exactly do we mean when we think about justice and individualism and ideas to do with the rule of law and how we govern ourselves in Western society. And it turns out that the whole thing is way more racist than it pretends to be.
That's right. Clearly, like reading, easy. It isn't actually a heavy, hardcore, really dry academic read. It's actually quite interesting and quite fun and quite sort of learning.
I
feel quite Trojan horsed in this respect. But why was it so important for you to embark on this journey and take a topic that's actually a lot of people would avoid?
Thank you for saying that it's not heavy reading. That was definitely the goal. It's a book for a general audience. And so the fact that hopefully I've taken some complex ideas and made them accessible is a real compliment. So thank you. Why did I take this up? Well, in part, I have to give credit to my editor, Harriet Poland, who came up with an idea for a book. Originally, it was something like 10 trappings of Western civilization. And so this is my spin on that idea. And I guess what I bring to it is several years of having been the curator of a museum collection at University College London that was named after the guy who came up with the word eugenics. And this was a journey that I'd gone on myself, really. When I first started doing that job, first of all, I'd never heard of Francis Galton until I started working for the museum department that held the collection that was named for him. And then I guess UCL, this is what happens when you accidentally put a brown girl in charge of your race science collection, is that the more that I found out about it, first of all, it was shocking and kind of horrifying. You know, it's one of the best universities in the world. It's at the forefront of a lot of scientific investigation and research. And yet at the same time, here were these objects related to Nazi scientists in the collection. Here was ideas and work done by a guy who thought it was possible to breed better people. who was hideously racist and ableist in the way that he looked at the world. So first of all, that was a shock. And second of all, I found that when I started writing Francis Galton back into the history that I had learned at school, suddenly a lot of it made a lot more sense. And so I wanted to bring that to other people. I haven't really shut up about it since I started finding out about it myself. I guess my philosophy is if I've had to suffer through it, then you all should have to as well.
What was the most surprising thing that you learned?
Just the sheer basis of it, the fact that, and I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, and I'm mindful that that's what I sound like altogether. Having done this work for a while, one of the questions that gets thrown at me very often is, why do you have to make everything about race? And my answer is, because everything kind of is, especially when you start to find more about the history of what that idea was, what it meant, how influential it's been. And what I say about eugenics is that it made race a broad church. So eugenics takes race and it starts to encompass ideas to do with disability, gender and sexuality, class, body size, all of these discussions that are around the banner of so-called identity politics today, but really have just been ways in which people's identities have been marginalized for centuries. So I think just the overarchingness of the thing continues to astonish me.
But a lot of it is about common themes. Even now, it's not like, oh, this is old school history. This is stuff that's still being touted now. What can actually be done? Should every school have a copy of your book? Because I think they should. But really, what can we do?
I think we just need to start talking about it. Sorry, and I don't mean to decry the huge amount of work that has been done by scholars and activists for decades, because I think a fair criticism of this book is that there's nothing new here. These are ideas that have been in circulation, admittedly, in academia. So there's an ivory tower element that we really need to tear down. But it needs to be spoken about and acknowledged. And I think there just needs to be an understanding that this isn't supposed to be a stick to beat people with. This isn't about making people feel bad. It's not about making people feel small or insignificant or like they are responsible for bad things. Everyone is responsible for how much they are open to and how much they look at the world. So, like I said, when I started to learn more about this, those typical things that you learn in history class made more sense. And I think that'll be the case for a lot of people. So acknowledgement is just a first big step. So read this book, but there are plenty of other books and so many other stories out there that we just need to start acknowledging and incorporating into how we look at our history.
I mean, the first chapter, called Nullus and Verba, I think, take no one's word for it. So do you trust anyone now? Do you trust anything now? Is there anything that you're like, hold on a minute, that's okay, I'm going to go with that? Or is everything just up for grabs?
If we were to always be properly scientific about everything, everything has to be up for grabs. You have to be open-minded. But I think if you read the rest of the book, it's probably very clear what my position is on that. And I am inevitably and just like, I am perfectly fallibly trusting of everyone in ways that I probably shouldn't be. To become critical is like a muscle you have to exercise and stretch. And I can do it on the page, but I won't pretend like I can do it in real life. I fall for this stuff all the time.
On that note, I mean, because, this is very, very serious stuff, but actually, you've done an amazing job, and I do definitely recommend that people should go and read the book. However, it's serious. You're not always serious. This is the case. You are a comedian, which can have serious elements, but how on earth do you marry that? What's going on there?
I was thinking a potential title for this would be Laughing to Keep from Crying. So often people do ask me, you find out about all this horrible stuff. How do you keep sane and how do you not cry all the time? And part of that is, having to be able to maintain an academic distance. I think there's a value in that. But when it comes to talking about these sorts of heavy topics, my experience is, first of all, I need to be able to make fun of myself in this situation. There's an academic persona, which is inherent in the voice as well, that needs puncturing. Another important thing, by the way, racists don't like it when you laugh at them, which is a good enough reason for doing anything. But also, there are aspects of this history that are so ridiculous as to be inherently funny. If we don't acknowledge that, then we just sound ridiculous ourselves. But I have always been a person to find the funny in things. I think that is an intelligent and engaging way of looking at the world. I don't trust people that don't find the funny in things. Keeping in mind, of course, that being funny at the expense of other people's humanity is not funny at all. And it's also rigorous. When I do comedy about my research and about this history, it means that I've got to be accurate, concise, and clever. And as you can probably tell in how long it's taken me to answer this question, that isn't necessarily something that comes naturally. It's something that's part of a craft. So I enjoy the craft, and it encourages me to be rigorous about what I'm saying and the message I'm trying to get across.
How do you prep for the comedy elements? Like, are you taking notes and being like, oh, that's something I can definitely not make fun of as such, but play with a little bit stronger in order to convey that message? Like, what is it about the craft? How have you trained yourself? Because you stand up as well. Without giving away your secrets, how do you manage those comedy elements while also doing everything else that you're doing?
The thing that you've just described is what I would do if being a comedian was a day job. And I would love that. There's an element of me that would really adore that, just to kind of absorb and have time to reflect on those things. The way that I write my sets is that somebody asks me to do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes somewhere, and then it'll be the day before they've asked me to do it. And that's when the writing gets done. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. That's kind of also the joy of the format, is that there's so much glorious room for failure. But I've not done a huge amount of study in terms of the mechanics of comedy. I've loved comedy from when I was a very, very young child. I probably watched a whole bunch of stuff that I really shouldn't have watched. To watch Dave Allen as a 4-year-old is probably not recommended. But I loved him and I thought he was great. And so I've hopefully taken some of this stuff in by osmosis. There's a bit of practical stuff in terms of learning how to write jokes and structure them. Yeah, the joy is actually being on stage and interacting with an audience, seeing what they're into, what they get, what they know, what they don't know, how far they're willing to follow you, how adept you are at being able to bring them with you. To me, the joy is in the doing, probably more than in the putting it together. But that's probably just a sign of how unprofessional I am when I go about the whole thing.
Doing all of that and being able to put yourself out there, it's not easy. You know, it can be tiring. You can come under attack. You can have people abuse you. You can have fans. You can have everything. So what do you do, again, without giving too much away, because it is for you, that's for you. How do you relax? How do you sort of take time for yourself, bearing in mind you're giving so much to the world?
Well, thank you for saying that, because at the beginning of you asking that question, my initial reaction was, I don't actually do that much because I'm not that famous. So, I mean, I aspire to it. So thank you for this opportunity. But I am inherently lazy. It might be something to do with the way my brain is wired. And I shouldn't joke about it, but I kind of do, because otherwise I'd actually have to do something real about it. But I've essentially diagnosed myself as having ADHD by watching Instagram reels. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. So I don't actually work all that much. I'm always thinking. This is how I know I'm a thinker, is because I'm always thinking, but I'm not necessarily always working. And so, yeah, the work gets done. The work is quite deadline based, as you can tell.
But when do you get out of your brain?
Oh, I wish. Really? Is that possible? Who does that? Really?
Wait, you were at a walk earlier, right? Just where you went for. Does everyone talks about walking helping? I can't meditate. Does meditating help? Like, you're just like idea.
No, I can't meditate. Because if I close my eyes and sit in a quiet space, guess who's talking in my head? It's me. And that is also the person who's talking when I'm walking as well. It's like, I don't know whether you find this, but it's definitely the case that I'll sit and struggle over a paragraph for about 2 hours staring at the screen. Nothing happens. And then the moment I get up from my desk and or shut the front door to go outside for a walk, something immediately clicks into place.
Yes.
And then I'm like, oh, can I go back and write that down? No, I'm going to go keep walking, but I'm going to be keeping thinking about it too.
Yes, and then you arrive and you're like, what was it again? What was that note again? What exactly, how did I write? No, I get where you come from. One of the things that I don't know if you have a technique like this. So when I'm having a thinking day, or I need to sit down and I need to write, and it takes me a while to get over that first hurdle, I tend to put on Holst and the planets. For me, that helps a lot because of the varying rhythm and the pace. Is there anything that helps you sort of push past, because that is a lot that you're holding in your brain and pushing through?
I do listen to classical music when I'm writing, because I find it just helps. So my poison is Eric Satie. I find him quite settling. No, again, tremendous unprofessionalism involved in my writing process. I will do anything. Like, if my house is clean, you can tell that I'm supposed to be writing something. But I also find actually that I need to get better about just writing down the thing that I am thinking. I'm working on ideas for, well, ideally a next book, but there's several other ideas that are kind of floating around. And what I find is that it's really easy to be thinking a lot about things and get those thoughts down onto paper. At that point, you're just in glorious first draft stage. So there's so many words. None of them are good. But hopefully there's the germ of a thought there that starts to outline itself. It's not necessarily that difficult to get the words on the page. It's just a question of then trying to make them good. I think that's the trick.
At what point do you learn to let go of your writing or anything you create, to be honest?
By the time something is published, be that a blog online or even actually the caption on an Instagram post or a book, by the time it's published, at that point I will let it go because I don't think it helps to dwell. Kurt Vonnegut said that there were two types of writers, and I can't actually remember what he called the second type. He said that there were bashers and there were some other people. And the other people are the ones that just write and it all kind of comes out of them fully formed, like it's amazing and they're in the flow and then they'll go back and they'll fix it. Bashers are the ones, and I'm a basher, which is that like you're correcting it in the sentence as you are going along. Although someone else told me, and I can't remember who this quote is from, but the advice is that you write drunk and edit sober, which I do find actually helps. But I do find that I'm crafting sentences probably with more effort than I should when they're first coming out onto the page. So I'm happy with it when it's done. But the doneness of it tends to be like an arbitrary thing that is out of my hands.
And is there anything that you haven't, any genre yet that you haven't sort of parlayed your way into that you're like, this is the next thing I'm going to tackle?
Oh God, you sound like my mum. My mum was like, well done, you've written a book. Next time, write a novel.
Yeah, I get that. No, I get that.
Please stop it, please. I have experimented with fiction. I do find it a little bit easier, but I find it easier to write, but much harder to be good. So I think I'm going to stick with the nonfiction and the history writing for the moment, but I'm scoping it out into other areas which are enjoyable at the moment. It's always that thing, if it's enjoyable until someone makes you do it and then it turns into a job and it's no fun at all.
That's why I couldn't work in a chocolate shop. It was hard times. With you have so much, you encompass so much, and even in your own heritage, within you're a third culture kid. Is that right to say? How?
Yeah. How bearing in mind there should be a better name for it, but yeah.
I was going to say, I don't actually quite like that. As I was saying it, I was like, I don't like it, but I'm going to have to keep going with it because that's the only terminology I know. But what role does that play? So for others who are sort of at the moment trying to figure out their own heritages, trying to figure out their place with diaspora links, etc. How does it help you navigate the world?
I mean, whether it helps or whether it hinders, there's no getting away from it. It's who I am. And so the real journey here has been acknowledging both of those cultures because, while I was growing up as an Indian person, very much in Western environments in the Middle East. We all encompass multitudes. Those are the ones that make up me. And I think just get the journey of getting to the place where I'm comfortable acknowledging my Indianness, because there's a lot of aspects of that identity that I don't enjoy. But also there's lots of aspects about the Westernness of me that I'm not that thrilled about either, it turns out. So just sitting in the discomfort of both of them actually is where I'm at right now, which sounds like a pit of self-loathing. It isn't always. It's more a question of, how can I make these things work together to best effect while acknowledging that I can be both. There's a power and a certain joy in accepting I don't have to be one or the other. Being all these things doesn't mean that I'm bad at all of them. It's just who I am.
I mean, if you had a comedy set like that, I would be coming to watch The Pit of Self-Loathing.
Pit of Self-Loathing would be a good title.
The pit. I mean, again, income. We talk about things like income strands and stuff like this. And I'm like, get the T-shirt. Again, I think I'm just saying that there are opportunities out there. One thing that I really like about being Indian is the food. Is there anything that you quite like in terms of sort of food that we bring to the world?
The food goes without saying, right? This is not a point of conversation. South Asian food is better than most of the others. And in point of fact, really what we're always talking, when we say about most of the others, we mean Western food. The fact that we understand how seasoning works, I think is enough of an argument to suggest that, this is a good thing. Although now I'm now reminded of my husband is English, and when we went back to India after we got married for the first time, my mum held a little reception for us. It was tiny, but she did tell me at this reception when we were at the buffet, she just sort of took me aside and she said, I have ordered the blandest things on the menu. She was literally saying it. She wasn't even referencing that sketch, right? Because she'd never seen that sketch and she doesn't know what it is. But she was genuinely saying, I have made them cook all the bland things so that your husband will be able to enjoy the food.
I was going to say, that's a Goodness Gracious Me sketch, but Goodness Gracious Me is absolutely phenomenal. Honestly, it's one of the best reference guides ever.
Yeah, It is the best. I don't know why they didn't. I mean, I know exactly why they didn't make more, and well, not the crew, but the BBC should be ashamed that it didn't make more. What my favorite thing about that show is Altogether, which was that it was unapologetically South Asian.
Yes.
There was in jokes. There was jokes in the language. They did not translate. They didn't do that on purpose. And actually, I don't know anyone else who's been that brave, even in recent years. This 20 years ago, we're talking about this comedy. 100% credit to them.
Between that, it was The Real McCoy originally, wasn't it? And then from The Real McCoy, then Goodness Gracious Me came. Honestly, when's your History of Comedy book coming out? Come on now. That's that.
Oh, it's not me. That's not for me. I mean, I kind of would love to, but also that's really not for me to write. There's plenty of other people that have done that. So yeah, the thing about comedy is it's not fun to write about. It's fun to do and it's fun to listen to.
But yeah, no, there are definitely people that are definitely opening doors, paving the way. I actually do believe that you are one of them and I'm not fangirling, but I am in a way fangirling because you deserve it. I honestly cannot wait to see what comes next. The fact that you're coming up with ideas, that's quite exciting. The fact that you do these live performances again, I think that's a real treat for anybody who gets to come across you. And I'm really grateful that your book came my way, that I fell in love with the book, that I was like, I need to meet the real person behind it, just verify they actually exist. You never know in these worlds. But honestly, I really think you're making a huge difference. When you are at the vanguard of something, it's not always easy. It can be a bit lonely because you are you are bringing stuff together that perhaps people don't want to hear. How have you been able to navigate that space that, you are having to open these doors that aren't comfortable spaces for everybody?
First of all, thanks for all that love. I'm so touched. I will take all the fangirling. Bring it. Thank you. So long as I can do it back in return. Because I know the reason you're asking that question is because you exist in the same space, so you know what it's like. And that's part of the answer is community. I'm blessed by the friends that I've been able to make in this sphere along the way. So shout out not only to your good self and the amazing work that you're doing here, but also to some of the people you've spoken to. Angela Saini has been so generous. Roma Agrawal, who's also an engineer who writes about the history of engineering in really engaging and brilliant ways. Writing is a very lonely profession. I think it's very generous. You're saying I'm at the vanguard. I don't think I am. I think I'm following in the wake of these people. It just so happens that the wave is a tiny one that needs to be bigger. I'm grateful to everything that other people have done. That means that, the work that I'm bringing out is, first of all, that there's a market for it. And also it's not necessarily as controversial as it would have been on its own. The publishing world is brilliantly fickle, and so it doesn't pick things up if it doesn't feel like there's room for it. So credit to those people for making room. But I think, why do I do it? Primarily because I genuinely don't understand how not to do it. And I don't mean to sound like worthy in that way. That's mildly nauseating, but it's just like, I don't know how you find out about this stuff and not talk about it. It's just not how I'm wired.
And that was the amazing Subhadra Das. Do you have an interdisciplinary life? Because I would love to hear from you, and perhaps we can chat on this podcast that goes with my newsletter, which is also called Have You Thought About, and can be found via www.ruthishah.com. Please join me next time for a brilliant conversation with another guest who likes to mix up everything in their life. Do listen to past episodes and rate and review the podcast if you've enjoyed it. And also thank you to Rian Shah for the music.